everybody. Welcome to KC Happy Hour. We've got a little bit of news stuff and a couple shout outs we'll do towards the end of the show, but I'm pretty excited about the guest lineup that we have tonight. This show tonight will be a lot about driver development and then a little bit kind of about almost like driver management of a career, because I think that's something that we get questioned a lot about, not just how to get in, but kind of how to eventually get to the point that you're winning races. And then for everyone that comes through our sport, if you've got the aspirations to go even beyond that, there's a bunch of different ladders to try and make it a career as a driver in terms of the racing world. And even then, when you have all the money, when you have all the talent, you can still get mismanaged, make the wrong decisions, and wash yourself out. So nothing better than to have a couple of guys joining us that are on that track and have done that very recently and are still working their way through it a little bit. Our good buddy, longtime returning guest of the show, Braden Eves, is here with me tonight. So thanks, Brad, as always, for coming back on.
Thanks for having me on.
For the first time, although it feels like it probably really shouldn't be much of the first time, I think, Mr. Jake Drew joins us here tonight. Jake, congrats again on that ARCA West championship from last year. Thanks again for the time.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. Super excited.
And there is no driver coach, I feel like, that is more white hot right now with his talents coming to it. Lucas Palacio has been killing it in Mini. Aiden Levy is on a hot streak in KA Senior, and he's got a few more kids that we're probably going to be talking about soon. Mr. Martin Pearce is joining us for the first time tonight. And Martin's got a big dad following that's going to be tuning in and giving you a whole lot to mess with. So I hope you're ready, Martin, but thanks as always.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the generous introduction.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, again, everyone, for those that don't know everyone's path here, Braden Eves, USF 2000 champion on the road to Indy, now the USF Pro Championships, and has worked his way up the open wheel ladder quite a bit and still on that path. Jake Drew, as we mentioned, ARCA Menard Series West champion, working up towards the NASCAR path. So we've got two guys kind of on the two most common American racing paths when it comes into going into car racing, but also everyone here, multi-time national race winners in the U.S., karting champions in their own right, and still whenever they get behind the wheel, which we're lucky enough to say for all three of you guys is enough. We get to see it pretty recent and pretty common enough, know what it takes to become a winner. So first up, to kind of prime our show a little bit, one thing that I had everybody prep a little bit on this one tonight is I wanted to say, all right, you start back over from zero, knowing everything that you know, coming in, whether it's yourself or a brand new driver that you would be kind of coaching and developing, to become a winner at the national level, let's say, is the path all the way up to that point. Obviously Martin's done that the most recently with a couple of drivers we just mentioned. Jake and Braden have done it both themselves more recently than anyone else in here, not including myself. I am not a national race winner, but they are, as well as champions. And then I've coached plenty of guys also. So, Martin, let's go over to you here as the longstanding coach of two guys that are doing it right now. Starting over, again, today you were at the track with your son. So what do you tell brand new parents or brand new drivers on the way to kind of get up?
I think the first thing I'd say is try and find someone local to start with. That will save you a lot of problems trying to ship stuff and buying equipment and getting advice. So today I went down to Englishtown, which is probably my local track in between OVRP as well, I guess. So I went down there with my son, and Keith Raffle was there, and he's all very enthusiastic, pleased to meet my son, takes him out onto the track, shows him around. And my kid doesn't listen to me, the same as any other kid doesn't ever listen to their parents, but my son listens to Keith, takes him out on the golf cart, shows him around. So it's a good starting point for any father, just to get down to your local kart track and start from there.
Braden, I know you've got quite a few guys as well that, you've kind of had in at a bunch of different levels. So what are the kind of advice that you kind of start with a kid to get up and then, from the entry level point?
Yeah, I mean, I just wish that if I could restart it all, I wish I could get some maybe better advice earlier, because it always just seemed like I was always behind the ball game and getting coaching and getting onto a good team, getting a good equipment. It was as I went, I kind of got better and better equipment as I got older, which I think helped me, because when I was super young, I had pretty bad equipment, and I was last place. So I kind of went through that struggle for a while, which was, I think it was good for me. And it really humbles you. I mean, there was times when I was like last place out of 50 guys in cadet when I was like 8, 9 years old. But if I would have had like done like maybe, I mean, nothing like crazy budget or anything, but if I could have just done like 3, 4 days a year with like a good coach early on, like the first 2, 3 years that I was getting into national racing, that's probably the biggest thing that I would have changed.
Jake, what about you with you looking back of stuff that, do it all over again? You wish you would have done a couple things different.
Yeah, I think somewhat similar to Braden. I mean, I was pretty lucky growing up with a dad that raced karts prior, so I kind of had a coach built in for sure, and kind of gave me a lot of advice and taught me a lot of the, I say, like fundamental skills of karting. I think I've worked with some kids. I can kind of get them up to pace, but they struggle a bit with the racecraft or just driving offline. It's like all of a sudden they got to make a pass, and it's a big shock to them. They don't know what's going to happen. It's unexpected. So, but I think later on in my career, I wish I would have made the jump a little sooner into the national level. Kind of stayed pretty regional in my career until 17, 18 years old. I finally started to branch out and run some pro tour stuff. So I wish I could have been doing that later in my cadet career and in my junior stuff. Just kind of, I felt like I started to fall behind the 8 ball a little bit, not really sticking with all the top guys, and somewhat, they'd come back local and we could run okay. But I think I missed a little bit there and was a little bit behind when I started getting on the national scene.
At what point did you stop listening to your dad, or was there any point where you felt like, all right, I'm past the point where I don't need to listen to you anymore?
I think it was probably when I was 19 or so. He stopped being my full-time mechanic, and I was working with other guys, and was just kind of taking all my racing stuff into my own hands. And he was finally starting to admit that I had kind of passed him up on skills. So, which was cool to hear from him. I always grew up hearing a lot of great things about him. So for him to say something like that was really special to me, and felt, somewhat accomplished in that area.
Braden, can you think back of at any point from when the first few times, because your dad, when you started, had both you, your brother, and himself driving in a crazy packed out trailer for like local racing. When did you stop? I know this is why you're smiling. When did you stop listening to him and he needed to get you some help?
I think you need to take that question up with him because he would probably have a more accurate answer. But I don't think I ever listened to my dad ever when I was karting. I mean, it was we had no, it was, that's all jokes. But yeah, no, I mean, my dad would have been the first to admit that he didn't really know what he was doing when he was getting into it. We all got, sort of slammed in there, and then we had some local guys that were helping us out at Circleville. But I mean, yeah, I mean, my dad never really did any sort of on-track coaching or anything because I kind of passed him up on that pretty early, considering we all got started at the exact same time.
Martin, let's do something with again. We talked right before we went live a little bit. You had mentioned that you being able to get on track with Lucas when he was 6 and 7, kind of right after the pandemic, when there was not as much going on in the world and there wasn't as much racing initially getting going, doing a lot of test days. So how key is that of all the different stuff you've worked on to get him to where he's at today? Because he was even, front running it over the last year and a half, really, in each age group that he was at. But now today he's like even better.
Yeah, it depends on the kid. So with Lucas, like when I met him first in 2020, he was only 6. So whereas perhaps if other kids enter the sport later, they'll be moving into KA junior, but with Lucas, we were able to have a long preparation period to get him to where he is now. So like we said, I think it was 2020, just as COVID was finishing. So we went down to GoPro 2-3 times a week. And the track was empty because of COVID, which gave us a lot of time to get his kart driving up to spec. And we probably got there quicker, having more track time rather than just throwing him into races where he would crash and you wouldn't then get the track time as much. I mean, coming out of kid kart, you have to sort of get them out of their kid kart habits. So that was always, the first thing. But like I said, if another child comes in from an older age, then he won't have the kid kart habits. You'll be starting from a different position. So it kind of depends on the child. But with Lucas, we spent a lot of time at the track, which I think helped him his first few club races, he never crashed much. He still doesn't, touch wood, crash much. And I think that was just from learning what he learned right at the beginning.
Jake, you mentioned that, in your case, you kind of wished you would have jumped up a little bit sooner. Do you know kind of why? Do you ever talk with your dad looking back of like, you both agreed on it? Was it just he didn't feel like you guys were able to, put results up enough that you weren't ready? Or what were you, if you could attribute why you didn't jump up as early?
I think ours was more or less kind of a financial sort of thing. It was hard for us to come up with the money to travel and whatnot. Like I said, some of the kids I was running with would go run the national stuff, and they'd come back to the club level, and we'd run wheel to wheel all day and whatever. But just needed to advance myself a little bit better. I wish I could have had some of those opportunities.
And then, Braden, your thing was equipment. I feel like the breakout year, what would you say would be more of your breakout year? Was it more when you got over to the J3 guys? Or I feel like the first year that was really, really good was the year you guys kind of went on your own and did something almost similar to like what Martin is doing with Lucas and with Aiden Levy, where it was somewhat privateer, but basically having a driver coach with Gary Lawson. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it was hard because like there was a couple years where we definitely struggled with engine a lot. And like from a driving standpoint, I look back and I think back to like most of my junior years, and like I got second in the USPKS championship in X30 junior or Leopard junior, I think it was. Maybe it was X30, I don't know, but got second in that championship, but it was like always like halfway down the straightaway my engine would stop, and I was going against some like really big money guys and they were just blowing me away. But I think like from that year where I was with Gary, I think I should have won the championship as far as like how my driving was ranking up in the field. But I mean, I think I just kept, because my engine wasn't the best at the time, I think it made me keep progressing past it. Whereas like I started to do very well, but I was only getting second, third, fourth, whatever it may be, because I didn't have the equipment to necessarily win. So I kept pushing, like it's still not good enough. So I just kept trying to improve, trying to improve, and it basically just made me elevate my level. And then it was that 2016 when I was with Jay and started to really improve the engine program. And then at that point, it was like I had elevated my driving because I wasn't on the best equipment necessarily for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden, when I had the equipment, it was like bang. As soon as the same weekend that I had gotten a better engine, gotten a little bit more support from my engine builder, was that weekend where I had my first national win. Or what was technically my second one, but my first big Pro Tour win in X30.
Martin, I'm not as familiar with you yourself on your personal kind of, karting career coming up. So can you give a little bit of light to that? And I mean, I'm familiar with all of your success as of recent over the last, decade and a half, but, going back, are there stuff that you kind of wish you would have done a little different and stuff you kind of take into, the guys that you train now?
I suppose I was the same as Braden and Jake, that my father raced as well. So he coached me. And then same as those guys are saying, he got me so far, and then it starts getting professional, and father and son relationships are difficult at a motorsport track. So I ended up getting picked up by teams. I don't know, there was kind of a transition, I suppose, during my karting career, which was that it went from direct drive 100cc, and then suddenly Rotax came along. But I guess, yeah, I wish I probably had a coach that could have given me more confidence. I always lacked confidence as a driver, and no one was there to tell me different. And I think, a lot of the good guys in coaching will recognize what element of the driver they need to work on to try and help them, which I probably never had. My dad was my dad, so he treated me like his son. Obviously, he didn't take a step back like a coach would and say, look, this is what you need to work on. You're not confident enough, or, be more aggressive, or whatever the character flaw will be in the driver.
And in seeing parents' involvement, right? This sport is the parents are with the kids throughout the entire day. So if we focus on like the kids' development, right, from micro, mini, junior, is there, what kind of piece to a parent advice do you give, from seeing almost like probably seeing parents do it the wrong way, because there's parents that are extremely hard, on their kids. There's some that are hands off, and then everyone else kind of falls somewhere in a spectrum. So, when they get to that point that they hire someone like yourself, what do you kind of say to them, and ways to avoid of how to treat their kid?
I'll tread carefully here. Yeah, I suppose I've been brutally honest. Myself and Nick, like Lucas's father, we argue pretty much every week, and we threaten to quit every week. So we have a very honest relationship, which has helped Lucas to grow. There's a lot of stuff outside of karting that we try and work on as well with Lucas that he does at home. And I know in UK, like a lot of teams will ban fathers from the tent just because they're too disruptive to the kids. Like the kids will always listen to their parents before they listen to a coach. So if a parent is trying to coach their kid on the side whilst the coach is trying to tell them stuff, then the kids will always do what the dad tells them because that's their dad. So we had to have pretty honest conversations about, Nick's going to stick to the spanners and I'll stick to the coaching, which is hard for a father. And, I found it hard today with my own son in English Town, just doing the same thing. So I guess if the parents can do as Nick's done, which is to support their kid financially, but and letting the coach do the job. I think it's hard for the parents to do that. But if you can do that, then it makes it a lot, like with children, they have one teacher at school. You don't bring your parent into school to teach the kids. They have a teacher. So they always recognize that sort of voice giving them the advice. So I'd always advise the parents, if they can, just take a step back, allow the kids to be coached without them putting too much input in. And at the same time, I like having the dads around. They're fun. And like most of the dads, like with Kai Mars and Benja Fernandez and with Lucas, all their fathers work on the kart. Aiden's father disappears and gets Subway, but the rest of them all work on the kart. So and I try and help them with the kart and the setup, and I try and explain what I'm saying to their son, so that they're happy and understanding what's happening to their child as well. So
yeah, and like crafting a parent, perfect kind of parent to work for a kid too, right? Like Jake, what would you kind of to build on that? How should they be, and how involved or not involved, how supportive versus pushing the kid and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some tough conversations with my dad. I mean, when we kind of split our ways to where I started working with other mechanics and whatnot, he was always trying to help from home, and it's hard because he's not really there seeing it or whatnot. But, like I said, he was my mechanic for a long, long time. So, and even in the beginning, it was kind of like I had the decision, either we could do it for fun or we could do it competitively. And it was like, obviously I chose competitively. So he was always pretty hard on me, and I didn't have a coach or anything. So I had to listen to him. And that elevated my skill pretty quickly, I think, at a young age. But also too, like, I was just thinking about this, like it's kind of off topic, but race monitor and stuff like that, I was never looking at that when I was a kid. Like I always just focused on my own program with my dad. Like we were just our own solid unit, to where there wasn't a lot of other variables involved and thoughts for lack of confidence or anything like that. I wasn't looking at names. It was just focused solely on our own program and what we needed to complete as a task.
Yeah, like, because I think you can psych yourself out, when you do enough like homework on drivers, right? There's like some weird balance that you have to have. You kind of need to know who you're racing against at a certain point to know, like, okay, I can be more aggressive with this guy. I can be less, like, how to almost break down your opponents and beat them. But I think at the same point, at least for me, I was such a fan of everybody. And then as I got into announcing, then you purposely go and learn everyone's background and you learn all their accomplishments. You have that in your toolbox when you talk about them. By the time that I'd go back and race, I'd race maybe, let's say when I was announcing, the first full year I did was like 2017. I think. And I did about, or 2016 was pretty busy too. Somewhere around like 20 to 25 weekends going in and out. And then I'd race like 3 to 4. So they would be scattered between, and you'd go from building these stars up in your head to then lining up against them. And I think that's something kids even struggle with too, because they, when they look at like the age group they jump up into, right? At the end of the day, everyone's got really cool 10 advisors and looks really proper at the highest levels, but they're all just as scared as you are on the grid. But you don't think about that because you built them up too big in your head, and it was almost like a detriment. I feel like at my point that there was one specific race I remember that I started like I was in the zone enough, and then once I passed a guy or a couple guys that I was like, I shouldn't be better than this guy, then I started making mistakes, and then eventually I crashed out of it because I started freaking out that I was way too high. And then on the grid, I would just be a mess all the time, because I thought everyone was way too good, but they were just on their own program just as much as I was, probably pissed about the weekend or tweaked about everybody else too. So there's a weird balance with that when you can focus way too much on other people. Braden, your dad had you work on your go-kart a ton. How do you look back on that now? Because I remember when you and I were younger, you'd be like, God, I hate going to the garage, and my dad makes you do every single thing on, when you were 14, 15. But how do you look back on that experience now that your dad had you get really involved in the mechanical side pretty early on?
I'm definitely glad that I was involved in the mechanical side, because like my dad, like I never really had, well, you would say a professional mechanic, or even really anybody that, well, I didn't have like my dad was my mechanic pretty much until I was like 15, 16. And up until then, it was kind of, everyone in my family was kind of helping out, because we were running, when I was younger, we were running my dad and my brother and me, and I was running multiple classes because it was WK back in the day, and it was Comer, Yamaha, whatever, sometimes Comet. But we didn't have enough manpower to really do a proper team, and none of us really knew what we were doing, the people that I had with me. And like we had a couple of guys that somewhat knew what they were doing that were helping us, but it was still, sometimes upwards of 5 go-karts that were running. So it's pretty much, it got to the point where if I wanted my go-kart to run, and I would have confidence that at least I would finish the race or whatever session it was, I kind of had to look over everything that was going on in my own go-kart, which meant either me doing it or at least me supervising, if like while somebody else, I might be working on one thing while somebody else might be changing a sprocket or whatever, but I was having to look after everyone, because like it was my dad and my stepmom, and we were all like real new into it, super inexperienced. But I think like getting really involved on that side super early definitely makes you understand mechanically like what the car or the go-kart does, like understanding what caster is, where it's not like you're not just hearing, a tuner say, "Oh, I'm going to add caster." It's like, "Oh, we're changing the inclination of the kingpin and it's going to transfer more weight," things like that. Like understanding and like visually understanding all the mechanical side of things from a young age made me be able to give better feedback earlier on.
Martin, what do you kind of rate that with the guys that you develop? Like, thinking like on Aiden, who's now almost 18 or is 18, right? Like, because there's both a good pros and cons, I'm sure, that you can weigh out, where it's like they get probably a better understanding and a better appreciation for it, as well as like being able to maybe understand the concepts better, but you split their focus a little bit, if they're thinking about working on the go-kart on any given day. So how do you rate that in the way that you kind of approach it?
Yeah, I think like the sooner the kids get an understanding of the mechanics and what chassis adjustments do, that's going to help them just get faster and give better feedback. And if you're going to go professional, then you need to be good at that anyway. All the professional drivers, F1, whatever, they're probably almost engineers at this stage by the time they get to a full-blown professional career, because they're so in tune with what's going on with the car. It's funny, I was actually having a conversation with Jeff Aiden Levy's dad today to say that the next thing I want Aiden to work on when we go testing is we'll change a bunch of stuff on the car just so he can go out and get a feel for what it does, and then come back in and we change something else. Nothing about trying to go faster, or just so he gets a feel for what, raising the chassis, lowering the chassis, moving the seat, changing axles, what each step does, so he can then have a better understanding when we're testing to say, actually, I think I'd quite like to try this, because when we tried it at GoPro, that worked, or it felt good. It's kind of, it's probably the next thing he probably needs to work on, really.
With Jake, with you doing stuff with your dad, I can kind of draw a little bit on me doing with my dad a lot too, that, in the same way, neither of us knew as much as what we were doing. Your dad, obviously being a racer, probably did, but when it's just you guys in the pits, I'm sure you're helping him out with little stuff, working on the cart. So, like, is there a part of you that kind of appreciates the fact that you did and got to learn how to work on him pretty early on? Or, at some point, I know I would have this thought in my head that, like, man, if I could just be like one of those pampered kids under a really nice big tent with a coach and a mechanic and a team, it'd be so much easier, because all I would do is just drive, and then I would go, hang out and sit in AC or sit in a chair for an hour, versus come back, eat like a little bit of the sandwich we'd pack for the day or the lunch, and then help my dad mount tires, air pressure, little changes that I would help out on that most kids, when they're just with their dad, do. Like, how do you kind of look back on it?
For sure. I have a huge appreciation for what I was able to learn, not only working at the track, but working on my stuff at home. Like Braden said, it helps you really understand the vehicle, what you're operating with, understanding what you're trying to accomplish, a feeling that you're chasing, and knowing which direction to kind of lead yourself and your dad or your mechanic down to find that right, the right piece you're looking for. Right. And even in my car stuff, I worked in the shop and all that stuff, so had a huge understanding with that, and really appreciated the way that I was able to have dialogues with my crew chief and whatnot, and talk about things that we wanted to chase. And so I think from a young age to learn skills like that, to work on your stuff and have good feedback, like, it carries all the way through your career, and you can just build on it more and more and more.
Well, we're going to speak careers a little bit right after this break. We have a short commercial break coming up, everybody, so stick with us. Again, we have Braden and Jake, which are awesome to talk about kind of the path they've taken all the way through. We've got some of you guys having some comments and questions in the chat. You can keep on sending them in for everybody that we've got on our panel. We'll have all that at the end of the show, so we'll be right back. Don't settle for a national engine builder. Take care of yourself with an international one. SRP Engines is a global industry leader in engine services, specializing in engine formulas such as KZ, OK, OKJ, and Mini 60. SRP Engines is the engine of choice for Magic Kart USA and helped power North America's #1 ranked pro shifter driver AJ Myers to the 2021 SuperKarts USA Pro Tour National Championship. SRP Engines can also service any spec engine class of your choice, including IAME and ROC divisions. However, if you're looking for the absolute choice when it comes to KZ shifter engines, there is nobody better. For more information, contact Amr Sanada at srp-engines.com. KC Happy Hour is proudly presented by the Rock Sonoma Karting Championship, presented by Cameron Race Promotions, the most competitive Northern California karting series. Featuring a 2-day format with practice on Saturday and racing on Sunday, multiple track configurations, and a massive prize structure including tickets to Rock Vegas, race car test opportunities, and race rewards. Rock Sonoma is the training ground of multiple national karting champions each year and race car champions as well. Featuring a full Rock Cup USA class structure with each race weekend streamed live via YouTube, it's a series you cannot miss. For more info, check us out online at zanzarukarting.com. All right, so let's go in a little bit with the first kind of viewer question that we had that I think will be pretty good on this one. So this is from Jason Van Eddy, and he said, when does racing for fun change over and become racing, as a career or towards a career? So, Martin, I'll kick this one kind of over to you first. When does it change over for, from just for fun for serious? And is that an automatic thing, or is that something that you make that decision at a certain point?
No, you go through the fun stage. Will be when you first start learning. You go do your club races with your dad and doing it out the back of your car, out the back of your trailer. Then I guess the seriousness is when you start spending more money. Like national level racing costs a lot of money, and it then becomes very serious. So I'd always advise people to try and learn as much as they can at a club race, and then before jumping straight into national stuff, because it suddenly doesn't become very fun when you're crashing and starting 43rd in a grid and spending fortune on crash damage. So the crossovers, yeah, but in between when you jump from club to national, and you should probably have a buffer where you then hook up with a coach or a team and work with them to prepare you for the national racing.
Braden, what about yourself? When did it change for you from fun to racing as a career?
Well, I don't think it should really ever become anything other than doing it for fun or for your own self. I don't know exactly the word I'm trying to pull, but it should just be for fun for yourself, to be honest, forever, because you're not going to suddenly be accidentally bumped into a professional career and be like, oh shoot, well, what am I doing here? I mean, at the end of the day, it is extremely, extremely difficult to make it in racing unless you come from millions and millions and millions of dollars. So it needs to be for fun. You need to do it for yourself always. It needs to come from, your own motivation to get better and to do better and go to bigger races and continue to progress your career. But the reality is, I mean, it's very difficult to do. So if you're not enjoying it and you're not actively, trying to get better and you don't enjoy that part of it, then you shouldn't keep doing it. But in my opinion, it should always just stay for fun. And obviously you want a career in it, but that shouldn't be your driving factor behind it.
What do you think, Jake? How would you answer this?
I mean, I think they kind of touched on it for sure. If the fun's not there, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. I mean, it's tough for yourself to be doing it, and probably a lot of people around you helping you, supporting you. So if nobody's having fun, then there's no reason to be doing it. But like I said, from a young age, it kind of decided that this was a career path that I wanted to chase. So I didn't really have a switch over from fun to a career. It's just always been chasing that since I was 7 years old. But again, if you're not having fun with it, then nobody needs to be doing it.
I think, and we say fun is like a general thing. I think, when you're like racing for fun, I think you're probably, again, at whatever level you're at. I think Martin's right that for sure, if there's no like, if it's not at all seriousness, then probably racing the higher dollar stuff is not really going to make sense for you, because the weekends are longer, the days are more spread out. That kind of camaraderie and like, fun atmosphere is always less and less and less the higher the expense level to compete is going to be. I think when you're like from a parent looking at the kid, where that, okay, let's consider pushing towards like getting more serious about it in terms of wanting to win, is when the kid almost like likes the struggle and like comes away from a weekend where they lose or they fall short of whatever goals that you guys had in mind, and their mind is on how they can get better or stuff they would have done and wanting it. Because I think everyone here can attest, you can't, no matter how much you want, whether you're a coach or whether you're a parent or whether you're the only person that can control how good someone's going to be is the person behind the wheel, and they've got to enjoy the struggle, enjoy kind of the challenge, and want to get better. And so if you come out of a race weekend and you don't win and your kid is just happy, enjoyed playing around with everybody else at the racetrack, then okay, maybe we should spend it at a level that there's no need to go any higher racing than what we're at right now, or even maybe it's worth dropping down a little bit because they're content with how it is. And then if they, if it's only fun when you win, then you should stay at the level that you win at. We, as drivers, I think we can get pretty elitist that like, oh, like some guy's just racing and he's just winning in this class that's easier, or this level of racing that's easier. But if that's fun for them, then great. But when you look at like, okay, serious towards becoming a career, which like Braden made a great point that, no matter what, however serious you get, how bad you want it, there's a much bigger chance that you're going to not get it versus get it. But if you're as a parent, like kind of to decide, all right, how serious should we take it? It should be based on, I feel like, how your kid reacts to like a weekend when they don't like do really good, and are they like pissed off? Are they like hungry? Like Braden and I have joked that the kids that are sometimes like throwing fits and crying and like the scale line in cadet are like going to be really, really good drivers when they like mature and get over in like junior and senior, because that kid wants to win and he's usually frustrated that he's not, winning. I'm not saying that, you should encourage your kid to go make, fool themselves and encourage temper tantrums in the scales, but you can tell they want it. So when they come away from a weekend and they really want to win and they're willing to put, they show that they're asking you or asking for help or like, there's enjoyment in the struggle. Then, okay, like that's the right mindset. They're at the right point that we can take it serious and it makes sense. And you can justify it more than just a hobby, that this is a challenge that they want to try and overcome because, shoot, I had one more thing I was going to add on to that and I just totally blanked on it. Oh, I remember. This comes from actually Blake Hunt, the USPKS race director and part-time driver now, used to race a lot more. I remember his dad came to me at the end of a club race one day and he's like, I don't understand this sport. 99% of the time we hate it. We suck. We're not winning. This is terrible. We're just pissed off. And then 1%, we win and we love it again. And we're just addicted to that 1% and we just keep going more and more and more. And that's what it feels like. So you have to enjoy the fact that you aren't, going to win most of the time. I mean, in Martin's case this year, I feel like you've won about as much as you've lost. So that point doesn't stick as much. But the truth is, right, that you're just not going to win as much as you're going to lose. And you have to almost enjoy the fact that what comes out of losing is you work to get better, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of lows before getting to this year, that's for sure, with Lucas. And actually, just what you said, his first race that I watched him at, he was just at a kid kart, spun at the first corner of the final. Halfway through the race, the leaders were catching. He got black flagged to come in, so he wasn't lapped. And he came in and he bawled his eyes out. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that, but he was really upset. And I was like, this kid really wants it. He wasn't angry. He was just upset. He wanted to do better. And you could see that he had the passion. So
were you like that as a kid, Jake, at all? Were you throwing temper tantrums when you sucked?
I'm sure I was, but usually a little more in private. My dad was probably a little more public about it. Some people could agree.
Let's give a little bit of context to your path first here. So we want to talk about a little bit career stuff. NASCAR is not nearly as common as open wheel or sports car or the pipe dream of Formula One for guys in road course karting. So where did that kind of idea start and what's been the journey like? And, to this point, I guess.
Yeah. So I think a lot of opportunities come through, not only right place, right time, but just connections and meeting with people and, being respectful around the racetrack. The Brancati family that sponsored my car racing stuff had the ARCA West team. They were involved in karting long ago, and then grandson started to grow up and started racing go-karts. So the relationship between our families kind of reconnected, and conversations started to come up and opportunities arose to test in a late model, test a spec late, and inevitably led into running his ARCA West car for 2 years.
And what would, if you would have had, maybe I'd say not like carte blanche, right, but an open check, would you have wanted to do anything a little bit different going back, spend more time in the late model, spend a little more time in the ARCA car, or do some other different kinds of racing going up to get you ready for oval racing?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a little more late model stuff when I was younger, or been able to take that step myself a little bit sooner. But like you said, stock car racing as a road course guy is not really typical. I mean, I never thought myself that was something I wanted to do or anything like that. But from my first lap in a stock car, I started to enjoy it, fall in love with it, and now I can't take my eyes off it. I'm watching every truck race, every Xfinity race. I was watching late model stuff earlier on Flow, and it's just like there's so many things you start to learn, and it's such a different style of racing for sure from the road course stuff. But yeah, I do wish that early on I was able to do a little more late model stuff, just at an earlier age. I mean, my progression went from go-kart to an ARCA car in I think less than a year. So that was a pretty big jump from X30's 20 horsepower to 650 in an ARCA car and almost 3,400 pounds. So that was tough to figure out. But, touching back on feedback and being mechanical and stuff, working on the cars, that definitely helped that. And I was always pretty visual in my career, watching other guys, and was lucky to have a lot of people around me I could talk to and ask for advice, and actually had a bit of coaching and whatnot on some test days. So that helped a ton.
So it was almost happenstance for you a little bit, just kind of being around and networking really well, and the opportunity came up of just, introducing yourself.
Yeah, 100%. That's how it all worked. I'm super thankful to them and everything that they've been able to do for me. It started with my karting. They stepped up, and I was able to do a bit more in 2019, and then was into a late model in 2020 for 7 or 8 races, and then moved up into the pro late and the ARCA stuff in 21, and then was just solely the ARCA West stuff just last year in 22.
And so that started from them bringing their kid out to like Cal Speed to the kart track to coach, and you were like the driver coach, making the relationship with the family.
Yeah, a bit. My dad raced against Bob's sons, James and Tony, and then James' son Luca was getting out of kid kart into the micro stuff, and he was pitted under Tony at Formula Works, and we just have conversations. And I was working with Tony too, so I'd be out there on Wednesdays and try to help out, do a little coaching with Luca, and he kind of sparked the conversation of, well, what do you want to do as a career? And to me, I didn't really have an answer. It was just any opportunity I could get, I would take. And I think he started to talk to his dad, and things just really started to fall in place with them.
Braden, on your front, yours was pretty strategic. I feel like on the jumping point over to open wheel stuff. We've seen a lot of people. Well, maybe not a lot. Everyone kind of jumps at a different point. Everyone's got a different mindset of when they should get out, when they should go into the car stuff. I'm sure, again, we hear from Jake. Jake's stuff was a awesome, lucky opportunity. In your case, you guys had a little bit of a budget kind of set aside, but tell a little bit of your story on the jump that you made over to the F4 series, and then kind of how you kind of position yourself up, but especially on the transition.
Yeah, so when I was my last couple of years in karting, I was with Jay Howard, and this was at the time where my first year with him, he was just in talks of this new series, F4 US Championship. It's supposed to be a good step from karts to cars, blah blah blah. But I didn't have the budget for anything when he was talking about getting it going. So I was just, racing and trying to win every race that I was doing. And, I started to get to the point where, I was getting older. I was 17, I think, when I first drove a car. I did Skip Barber way back in the day, but that was more so just, get the experience, first time in a car, whatever. Later on, I started to win races. I won 2 Pro Tour races in 2017, and then I went over to Italy as well that last year I did in karting. But I felt like I had finally, sort of got what I could out of karting, and I waited until I knew that like I was very, very well ready. And Xander, you know this because we used to do iRacing all the time together, but we were always on the simulator doing races nonstop, practicing, and like that stuff helped a lot. So like when I first got into a car, I had an understanding for the basics of the braking and loading the front and, trailing off the brakes. And, obviously I had no real idea what I was doing, but I understood the concepts a lot better than I think most people that, back then simulators were sort of just getting figured out. I mean, we were on G27s, but it was still helping. We were still essentially in the seat all the time. But yeah, when I felt like I had gotten like every single bit of learning that I could out of karting, that was when I moved in, because we essentially took almost our full season of budget, or like half a season of budget, to do one F4 race. And I was at IMS, and I had exactly 2 days of testing prior, and they were both like half days where I was sharing the car. It was literally just, hey, let's do 2 days of testing, and I did, my second day out at pit, and I was quite a bit quicker than everyone else on the team. And Jay was like, "Oh, like we could win at Indy," and I was like, "Okay." So basically, we threw half our season budget at one F4 race, and I managed to get second, third, and fourth in the 3 races at IMS with almost no testing. And that at that time, F4 was probably one of the bigger series. Kirkwood was racing, Peterson was racing. Um, I can't even like. I'd have to go through the results to see everyone, but it was definitely no slouches in the series. And the fact that I like immediately went in and got results, then I went. I had some money that I was getting, behind the scenes to help me out. Um, but it really was a matter of I had to perform immediately if I were to have any shot of a career whatsoever. If I didn't go in and, start off with a bang immediately, it was like, okay, well, you'll have your one race or whatever, and then you'll go off to college. But the fact that I was able to get those results immediately, then it was like, we went through some people that we knew, and Jay helped to talk to some of my sponsors, that were sort of on the fence, and Jay was just trying to, explain to them, like, no, this kid is really good. F4 is a real series. If you're good in F4 and you win here, like, you will move on, and he will have a chance at IndyCar. And just having like, I had really good guidance when I was getting into cars with Jay. Um, just having somebody that has done the whole car thing when you're in karting, it's just completely like you have no idea. You have no idea any connections in cars. You don't know any of the teams. You don't know how any of it works. So getting in and really like performing immediately was the only thing that made it possible for me to continue.
Jake, was there, in I imagine maybe not, right, with the Bruncatis, but, when you get that 1 year shot in ARCA West and then you come up short off the crazy points tie because your teammate thought the race was over a lap early and fell back, which is, again, just goes down in history as one of the wildest way to lose a title. Um, Going into that year, was that a make or break year? Like it sounds obviously with those guys owning the team and you working in the shop, it was probably committed for the season, but you come out of that race and it's like, do you not know if it's over then?
Yeah, I didn't really know after that final race. We didn't really have a lot of, you could say, official conversations. I just kind of kept working in the shop, and I heard the other guy wasn't running. I kind of got wind that they were going to bring me back, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, and just kept working at it. Um, but yeah, I mean, even before that, that wasn't the original idea to race full time in 2021. I was just supposed to keep getting seat time in the pro late at Irwindale, maybe make 3 or 4 races in the West Series, and keep my rookie status for the next year to go full time and have that experience. But he called me January of 21 and asked me if I thought I could handle it. Of course, I said yeah, but think to myself, there's no way. I haven't had any of the experience, but started working there and testing right off the bat, which, just catapulted me into the whole thing. But even early on in that year, I never thought, nobody thinks jumping into something so foreign that they're going to go fight for a championship at the end of the year. It's kind of a dream come true for sure. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of kids that would love to have a situation like that. And kind of everybody I've been working with now is all dreams come true and all that, never give up and just keep working at it. So yeah, to answer your question, no, though, I didn't know what was going to come after that. There was no real conversation about it.
Martin, going back on your kind of career throughout, motorsports as a wide scope, right? Do you have kind of some of those make or break moments you look back on, or like if it's not a make or break like Braden, it was like a networking thing where just out of, you making a good connection with one guy or another or a team owner or another that, lands you in a really, really good opportunity driving or work wise or both that you can kind of have a good story to draw back on?
Yeah, I guess there's those sliding doors moments where you get an opportunity and you can take it. I guess if you always put yourself in a position of getting a good opportunity, then it's going to land on it, which is, it sounds a bit old fashioned, but hard work and good results, you're going to get more opportunities than if you're not working hard and getting bad results. So, any advice I'd give is to try and get yourself towards the front, and your name will come to the top. And if you've got a team looking around for a driver, which happens a lot in karting and cars for people who want a sort of lead driver in the team, then it puts you in a good position for that. And then that's when you start going up the ladder, really.
Where do you yourself kind of rank like the networking and social atmosphere side at the track for a driver, right? Like there's a good point like you make there about like results are important. But in terms of like going and shaking hands and introducing yourself to other people, do you rank that as important or not too much? Where do you kind of see that?
I kind of learned as a kid, I wasn't very good at doing what I'm doing now, basically, which is talking openly. I don't think any English people are. Americans are much better at it. We're terrible at talking. But my dad was friends with Derek Warwick, who was a Formula One driver, and my dad always say, "I'll watch him." First thing he would do is greet someone with a handshake, so there's some sort of bodily contact, so there's a connection. And he was very good at talking. And I think that's probably a side that kids are a lot better at now than when I was younger, which is that they're a lot more PR savvy, and everyone's got an Instagram and a TikTok and a Facebook and a media profile. And I remember Jenson Button, his first. I think when he won the European Championship, he was one of the first guys to get a manager who was the same manager as Kimi Räikkönen, and they took out a full page spread in the Autosport magazine, which all the big motorsport teams in the UK read, and that apparently helped bump him into the eyes of the big Formula One teams. So coming out of karts, he was already known by Frank Williams. They'd all seen him in Autosport, and they were kind of the first to really start pushing kind of him as a product. Whereas other kids, they were trying to rely on sponsors to get known.
Jake, in your case, right? Like, had you made it a point at all before you'd met the Bruncatis to, introduce people beyond just people that would come up to you, like to almost make an effort to be a little bit social at the track on the off chance that you might meet someone that would make a big impact on you? Or was that like the moment when you realized that even the little bits of interactions can have big weight?
Well, the whole situation with the Bruncatis definitely opened my eyes up even more to that. But I was starting to realize, the year or two before that, I started doing some races with Giebler and Baldozer with some support, that I wasn't going to be able to make it on my own or with my own financial backing, that I was going to need support from people. And you never know who's going to be able to supply that to you, or who's got a connection somewhere or whatever. To never bat an eye to anybody. It just talk to everybody the same with respect, and take a second out of your day to talk to whoever and shake hands and hear a little bit about themselves, or share part of you with them, and they can carry that and carry your name to another conversation down the road. And you never know where things are going to end up. You got to approach every opportunity the same, really, and take any opportunity that, like I said, maybe you don't see it right now, but down the road, all of a sudden it comes back, and it's the greatest thing you could have right there.
Braden, what about you? When did it kind of click in your mind that it's important to go and talk to people, right? Because you and I both were pretty to ourselves a little bit when we were coming up, just kind of our own little buddies in circle, but not so much where you are now. I feel like you've even pushed yourself out of your comfort zone, like like Jake has, to go and talk to a lot of people that you wouldn't maybe normally gravitate to, like go outside your circle a little bit and be social. When did that click for you to become important?
I think I always knew that it was a good thing to do that, but it's, when you're young and, you're coming up, we're only like 15, 16, 17 coming up, and we're not very good at social things in our teenage years, or at least I wasn't. And it really just took a boost of confidence, honestly. I mean, everything kind of comes together, right? Like you start winning races, you might be that guy at the racetrack. Like, if it's karting, if you're like, if you're always in contention for the win. You start to, you get confidence from that. You walk around, you feel like you're the guy. And then it kind of helps because, I didn't know how to, talk to adults or older people like I do now. When we're in school, high school, whatever, we're always talking to people our age, and it's always very non-intelligent things that we say to each other in high school. So when we actually have to start, making connections and actually talking about things that matter with older people or potential sponsors, that was a very difficult thing. But it's something that I always wanted to get better at, and I was always trying to get better at, and trying to, generally be nice to everyone, but try to connect with people that were older than me was the big thing.
We've got a quick little break here coming up, our last of the show, a couple questions, and a few more little points we're going to hit. So let me pull that up real quick. We'll be right back after this with Jake Drew, Martin Pearce, and Braden Eves, guys. So stick with us.
Looking for the perfect vacation spot and a family fun weekend where a race breaks out? Look no further than Karting the Coast. Our 10 race schedule is already well underway, with stops at NOLA Motorsports Park in New Orleans and Finish Line Performance Karting in Biloxi, Mississippi, where our podium ceremonies are on the beach. We know how to have a good time and put on a good race, and all that we're missing is you. To find out more, visit kartingthecoast.info. Kart Store USA is a kart parts supplier that racers and retailers can count on when they need reliable advice and service. We focus on servicing all racers with honesty and pride while maintaining customer satisfaction. We carry a full stock of Kart Republic and Tony Kart chassis, as well as IAMI and Vortex Rock engines. We've also got a host of other parts available and in stock, such as products from Rev Performance Materials, Jekko Racing Seats, and more. We have a 100% satisfaction guarantee. And on top of that, if your order exceeds $200, shipping is on us. Check out all we have to offer today by visiting us online at kartstore-usa.com. All right, welcome back, everybody. So to spice things up a little bit with the first question after the break, a karting dad request. How do you deal with the moment you start running up front, the cheating allegations, or with the dad you're working for, or parent or family or driver you're working for that gets beat, and you have to convince them that the person beating them isn't cheating? So Martin, as the guy that's working with two kids that are starting to win a whole lot right now at the first point, Jake and Braden are a little removed themselves. They've won a while. What do you say to that when guys that you're legal, or that the other guy that you're getting beat by is legal, and you've got someone saying no, they have to be cheating? How do you kind of deal with it, or look at it, or I don't know?
It's to be honest, it looks suspicious. I've got two drivers that are suddenly winning this year. They weren't winning last year, so I almost think we're cheating. But there's no way of. I guess the better you do, the more people want to beat you. And if they can't beat you on the track, then maybe they can lobby the tech guys to say, "Oh, I think they're doing something. Look, I try and show people Lucas's video. Someone at Homestead said, "Oh, he's so fast onto the straight," and I said, "Oh, well, here's his video. Every lap, his rear tire was his front tire was hanging off the track half a cut every lap. He was so consistent. We spent a lot of time testing at Homestead during the winter in Nick's trailer and putting a lot of hard work. And his consistency got better and better the more we tested. And I suppose if you're not familiar with, working hard, then I guess it's going to look like we're cheating. So, but it wasn't. There was a lot of hard work and a lot of laps. Nick spent a lot of money. We spent a lot of time sweating at Homestead in the dust bowl that's the paddock there, and just banging out laps. But the tech guys have a tough job to do, and I'm sure everyone's in their ear. And it's not just obviously Lucas or Aiden. Like whenever anyone's winning, Ryan Norberg or whichever team, there's always accusations of cheating. So I guess you just have to leave it to the tech guys. I suppose you could. I mean, there's rules where people can buy the equipment, or you could try that to stop the allegations, maybe. Or if someone really thinks that someone's cheating, then they should be allowed to protest and say, look, I want to have this engine stripped down and thoroughly checked out, or whatever they feel, the exhaust or the ignition or the fuel or the tires or whichever area people want to think that the cheating's happening in, then give it a shot, I suppose. But you have to pay your money to get it forensically examined, I suppose.
Has that ever happened to you in your driving career, where someone was like, "Oh, Martin's got to be, doing something"? Have you ever been in that spot as a driver?
No, I was never that good. No, but it happened a lot in Europe, in the UK. And there was one kid who was cheating, and I remember it in Rotax. He had an offset crank pin which changed the timing of the engine, and people were accusing him for cheating a long time, and they never found it. And eventually they stripped the engine and found this offset crank pin, which obviously involved splitting the crank, which you never have time to do in tech after the race. So, sometimes there is a bit of smoke, a bit of fire where there is the smoke, but generally a lot of the accusations come to nothing. So, I just think the series perhaps, they took Lucas's engine off after the last race to thoroughly check it, and it came back okay. And we were kind of, I suppose we were almost glad of it, that they took the extra time to keep everyone happy that we weren't doing anything crazy with the engine, which we're not. We generally hire Walters, and like 90% of the grid are on them. So,
Jake, have you ever been in that point yourself too, where you started running good, and you got accused of cheating, or a driver you were working for, started thinking someone else was?
No, I don't think so. Not cheating. I had a couple motors claimed from me. I had a couple good ones, but those were those were kind of barn finds, really, in my career. But I think a lot of people, when people are accusing of cheating, I almost feel like it comes from laziness. For me to hop back into a go-kart, I don't feel I should necessarily expect to just go out there and win and beat these guys that are running every week and putting the time in and testing. And I think a lot of people that are making those accusations, I don't really see them work as hard as some of the others, to where it's almost like it's a way out for them, or they almost come to the track defeated already. They're just showing up, oh, this guy's cheating, this guy's doing this, to where either way, you still got to beat them. You're not the tech guy. So if they're not finding nothing, then you need to step up and figure it out. You can't just keep making excuses all the time.
Braden, what about you?
I have a pretty, weathered opinion on this topic, because, I think there is some of that in karting a little bit. There's always going to be people that are doing this and that, trying to get an advantage. But at the end of the day, the people that, if there are people that are winning and they're winning because they're cheating, they're not going to go anywhere with their career. Okay. All they're doing is becoming worse drivers anyways. Like, this stuff does happen, and I'm not going to be one to hide it. But, the reality is, all you can do is control the things that you can control, right? If you're a driver, you can control your program. You can control, making sure that your stuff is put together properly. You can, put yourself with the right people. You can do everything right and maybe not win. But as long as you're doing the right things, then it will come with time. Whereas, maybe some people have gotten wins illegitimately. In the history of karting, it's happened many, many times. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, right? You're going to know if somebody is good or not based on their on-track performance.
I think that's a pretty good point too, especially for, guys like you and Jake that have, done the transition over. That if a parent's like cheating, kid kart's the biggest cheater class out there, and you won't see on any driver's resume that they're a 2022 kid kart club champion. Like, no one's going to add that to their list, but it still is the biggest cheater class out there. And half the time the kids that come out of that win in kid kart, suck. Martin, you even brought it up that, like, yeah, when Lucas got into micro, we had to spend time dialing away kid kart habits that were, good of tracking probably early into the corner and, you know, wanted to just drive in way too deep because you're full throttle for most of the track and those things anyway. But you rob yourself of it because especially when you go up and you don't have that cheated up motor anymore, or you go to, you know, borrowing someone's equipment, whether you're renting an arrive and drive with a bigger race team or you're doing it, or, you know, doing stuff in cars where you can't just go get a cheated up little mini Swift and stick it in Jake's ARCA Menards car. You're going to get exposed at some point. So you just kind of hurt yourself a little bit. You know, I mean, Braden, you even said that being underpowered was almost kind of a blessing in disguise, that for the years that you felt like you were maybe, you know, second or third best equipment. I think we're even seeing that now. And like, you know, you look at how wicked fast Max Garcia is in USF 2000, and he was kind of like, you know, second fiddle and the best of probably one of a couple kids that were the best besides the Caleb Gaffera and Ernesto Rivera and RPG X30 juniors last year. And those guys felt like, you know, some weekends they were good enough to hang with them and some weekends they were a little bit under. But Max is doing really, really good. So even though he didn't have that banner year, Caleb got 30 main event wins. But, you know, both of them are trying to make a career in cars. And Max's first year in USF, like, is turning a lot of heads. So I think that's the perspective, too, that, like, even if the guy is cheating, at the end of the day, they're hurting themselves on the driver development side, right? Which for a guy that's coaching someone, it doesn't make sense to do it, right, Martin?
No. Yeah, cheating. Yeah, like if I felt we were doing anything underhand, you know, it's pointless with the kids. They won't learn. Like you said, kid kart is you kind of do perhaps see more cheating in that, but the kids are just never going to learn what they need to learn. It's, you know, it's crazy. I guess perhaps, I don't know what the solution is, and I don't know how it starts with people logically wanting to cheat. But I guess perhaps the teams and the amount of money that's now involved in karting has made it a little bit more tempting for people to try and bend the rules. So
it's as we kind of get to the last little bit here, and I think we had one or two other ones that I wanted to get to, but in closing to a lot of new families, you said looking back, you know, we would have wished we've done a couple things different, or kind of advised that it's important to find someone local to help. It's good to, you know, definitely get some coaching along the way, and the one-on-one stuff outside the racetrack, you're able to do, or outside of the race weekends, you're able to do a whole lot more. In your opinion, when should you kind of jump up in the deep end? Jake, you said you were wheel to wheel with those kids at the local level, but, you know, you guys weren't able to jump. But if you would have, you know, what's the milestone in your mind, like when you should go to the next level up? And Braden and Martin will go to you guys too, but Jake, to you first. At any given level of racing, club, regional, national, kart, you know, karts to cars, late models to ARCA Menards, what's the tipping point in your mind of when you should go, if you can go?
Yeah, I mean, I think in motorsports, confidence is huge, right? So, you know, I think you kind of got to stay within your boundaries of whether that's local or regional until you start to perform well at that level. And then you can kind of take that next step, because if you're behind the eight ball already on a local level and you try to go to Newcastle for summer nats, you're going to get stomped on, your confidence gets smashed, and you don't even know which way to look now. So I think you kind of got to get the ball rolling at your local level, then build up to the regional stuff, build up to the national stuff. And when you just start to have success and just keep the ball rolling and learning, then you can continue to take steps like that and keep moving on and progressing and carry that confidence with you throughout.
Martin, what about you? Like, is it confidence? Is it a quantifiable number of results, or is it, you know, a mix? Or when's the right kind of point to go up and up and up from where you're at?
For me, I just remember I'd won at my local club, and then we went to a bigger racetrack, and we just kept trying to race against better people, which then eventually brings you to the national level. But you have to be prepared for it. Like we were talking about, having the fun in the sport, it suddenly doesn't become fun when you're, you know, you move too soon, you go to a national race and you get smashed, then you go to the next national race because now you're committed to the national schedule, and you get smashed and you're spending an absolute fortune. Motorsport isn't like soccer or other sports where you can just turn up and maybe you lose, but then you just go home. It's like there's a lot more effort goes into it, a lot more money, a lot more time. So I would always just advise caution as to when you jump up the next rung of the ladder, because you can fall back down the ladder pretty quick.
And there's a big bit of preparation of wanting to kind of go, not just as a driver, right? But you got to be like, I think that's a good point. You got to be prepared, because the level to, you can win a club race on a go-kart that's not fully dialed in, or an engine that's not, refreshed, or not running like not running like the level of program. It's not just about the driver being ready to go up. It's about also knowing how to make, setup changes for the racetrack. Some of it you'll learn as the track gets rubbered up more, but that's probably a pretty good point too, Martin, that like there's so much more that comes with going up each rung in karting specifically, beyond just, is that kid winning at his level? Is he confident at that point too? Like, can you elaborate a little on that, or like some of the levels of going up?
Just from my own career, when I was starting karting, we had a local club which was fairly small. So say like Englishtown, you'd go and do a race there, which is smaller, and then perhaps you'd move on to GoPro, where you'd have it's a semi-national grid, but it's still a club race at a GoPro. It's just, like you were saying, and the biggest jump, obviously, when you move to a national level, it's a longer week. You become more tired. It's more money. There's more grip on the track generally, or there used to be. So there's a lot of stuff that you think you know, but you don't know when you go to a national level, which is why if you're not prepared, it can become pretty painful pretty quick.
Yeah. Braden, what about you? Anything specifically? You said it was when you felt like you learned everything that you could get out of karting. What was that point? What was that deciding factor where you felt like you learned everything you could get out of it? Because it wasn't off your first win. It wasn't even off your first national championship. So what told you that you were ready to go?
I think as a driver, to be honest, I think when we're talking about, being at that level, I think if you really know, like, I was my last year in karting, a number of times, for example, I might have to start at the back of the pack in Pro Tour, and I would always drive from like 40th to 7th. Like every time I would start at the back and they would only start 40, it was like I would always pretty much finish in the top 10 no matter where I started, and I was pretty much always in the top 5 and trying to compete for wins. But I don't think the results really matter, right? Because like 2 years prior to the years that I was winning everything, I was winning absolutely nothing, and I was getting smoked in senior in my first year. And you might see those results and say this kid is nothing, but at the end of the day, you only know, like, the people that are, or like the driver would know how good he is, and the people around him would. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, when you're ready, you're ready. If you have, it for me, I waited until I knew that I was ready so that I could make an impression and, get more sponsors and all of that. So I waited till 17 before I moved into cars. But I think if I, look back, and had I had a little bit more opportunity or a little bit more money, then I would have been way better off going into a sort of starter level open wheel series, maybe a 1600 or, something like that. Oh my God, my phone is blowing up. A couple years prior, because I felt like I never necessarily had a lot of seat time where I could really develop. Like, it was tough because I went almost after F4. I, only did a little bit of that, but when I went into the road to Indy, there's not much time to lose. Like, you have to just win the championships, bang, 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 get them out. And, you really do need to have some time to develop when you move into cars. So having, I think I probably would have had more testing in a car before I went into racing, but making sure that you're not moving up like too early, and making sure that, like, if you need financial help when you're going up, you definitely need to make sure that you're ready before you move into it, or else you're going to spend a lot of money crashing out cars and maybe making it less likely that you'll make it in a career.
To close out with you guys here, we'll give a little bit of a shameless plug all around. So, Jake, in your case, right? First of all, where can they follow you, and anything else you'd like to say to the rest of the nation here watching on?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you there.
Oh, any last shout outs you'd want to give here before you wrap everything up? How can they follow you with your racing career and so on?
You could take that little tag right there and follow my socials. Just trying to work things out right now for sure. But thanks to you for having me on. Thanks to all the people watching and listening. Hopefully got to learn a little bit of something. And thanks to everybody that's got me to this point in my career. If they're watching, thank you. Hope to see everybody soon.
Martin, what I see, I haven't seen really a wine glass going at all. So obviously you've stayed away for the dads watching back home. Do you have anything now with you getting the mic and the power to clap back at them? Because they've been shooting me text all show.
Yeah, they're a mean bunch. I hate working for them. No, they're good guys. They're very patient with me. I could tell lots of unfortunate anecdotes about our arguments and me losing my cool, but they take a lot of flack from me, and me telling them to stop talking to their sons and everything else. So yeah, they're very patient. But yeah, like with me, I'm kind of a bit more old school and have a Facebook account. I'm trying to get into Instagram a bit more, but yeah, I try and put as much information on Facebook as I can.
All right. And then Braden, for yourself, I know with Jake, his racing's kind of a little bit, we're figuring it out. But for you, next race you got should be what? USPKS in Newcastle at the end of June?
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. Working on getting back into the car stuff, just sort of working that out at the moment, trying to potentially get a full season going next year, or, potentially a one-off this year, but we'll see.
Well, guys, I appreciate all the time. We're going to clear out everyone that we have here. So thanks as always to all of our awesome guests. I did have a list of a couple shout outs before we let everybody go here from tonight that I wanted to reach out to. Because this week's been a little bit slow on the news front. I know there's some stuff going on in the background as we get ready for national stuff in June. That's worth talking about. I didn't really have a whole lot of time to touch on it, but there's two important things that I did want to say this week. First of all, if you hadn't already seen the post from our friends over at eKarting News about Casey Cook, he is needing a lung transplant surgery, and there's a lot that comes along with that health insurance won't fully cover. His full story is over on the eKarting News post. He's got that as a kind of a ticking not time bomb, but times of the essence for him with it. And he's a guy who's been around the paddock for a long time, racer. He's been tuning, he's been doing a whole lot of different stuff. And if you have the moment to go check it out, his GoFundMe, his whole story shared over on the EKN page. I wanted to give some love there. And then on the East Coast as well, a little bit of a somber story with Cruz Labrie, who I wanted to give a shout out to as well. He was racing a regional race up in the Northeast, had a crazy crash at about 80 miles an hour. And I have the full list here. I have to give a huge shout out to Chris Hatch as well, who had given me some of the info, but a crazy crash that left him with hospitalized for about a week and a long laundry list of injuries for him. So to Cruz, to you watching along at home, I want to wish you guys an amazing recovery and the best of wishes from all of us here. We hope that you are able to be back at a racetrack here really soon, buddy. He's running the Stars series, and hopefully we'll get back into it soon. So I wanted to make sure that we got those two shout outs in to Casey Cook, longtime racer, and then up and coming racer, and Cruz Labrie. It's not always the best news that I get to share, but we come together in a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of support and love going out. So if you haven't already, to check out Cruz Labrie's story. He's got an Instagram and a Facebook page. I'll put that in the comments here below. And if you haven't already headed over to the EKN page to see the post about Casey Cook, read that. It's a really inspiring story, and he's a guy you can read the comments as obviously a personality more than well spoken for in the paddock. But that's a bittersweet way to end things tonight. A huge thanks again to Jake, to Martin, to Braden for as always coming on and joining us. And giving us some good driver coaching and driver development advice. There's hours and hours that you can go on with it. The cool part is everybody in the sport's really good. So if you had something that you like from what one of those guys said and you want to message them, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, their stuff's always open and they're really key to help you. So hopefully everyone's questions, at least through the night, got answered. But 3 awesome talents that we have both on the track and off the track that I think could give a lot of really, really cool advice if anyone that needs it. With all that said, we'll sign off tonight's show. We'll see you guys next week.